Wake up, people, wake up, wake up. Wake up, people, wake up now. Wake up. Wake up, people, wake up, wake up. Wake up the people, Lord, wake up. Wake Listen. Up. Wake up, people, wake up, wake up. Wake up, people, wake up now. Wake up. Wake up, people, wake up, wake up. Wake up the people, Lord, wake up. Wake Listen. Up. It's all right. It's okay. Remember, the sun will shine in the morning. God bless. Wake up.
This show is sponsored by Glass R Us, 730 Seven Sisters Road, London, N15 5NH. Call Glass R Us for all your glazing needs on 0208 800 6663. For your glass and double glazing repairs, shelving, tabletops, splashbacks, mirrors, shower cubicles, balustrades and balconies.
You can trust Glass R Us because they are completely transparent.
Good afternoon, family. Good afternoon. Hope you are well. This is Brother Jegna here again, bringing you another Afrocentricity Bookman show. Hope you guys had a good week. Hope you're having a good weekend with your family and your friends. Hope you keeping busy. Hope you got a revolutionary mind. We are starting a new book today, you lucky people. And the book is called The Black Matrix. So The Black Matrix was written originally in 2006, but it's been reprinted, and this is the 2016 version. So The Black Matrix was written by Franklin G. Jones. And I'm reading from the back page here. It says, the modern continued mental and social suppression of African Americans under national interest. So it goes on and says, for the past half a century, the US government has implemented the largest covert operation in US history against the African American population through the usage of psychological warfare, and yet most African Americans are totally oblivious to it. There is a very desperate situation in which there is neither a struggle nor fight more pressing for African Americans than this one. For this is not a problem that we can afford to leave to another generation. This is one that we must fight and win now, or die trying, for the future of our race may be dependent on it. So it's a very powerful blurb on the back of the book, and he's speaking about African American, but I think it's fair to say that this system is put in place across the world, in the West in particular. And as you know, the West reaches across the world. So even though he's focusing particularly on African Americans, but it does say in the book black people generally, because whether in Europe, whether in the Caribbean, wherever Europeans reach and their systems of communications reach, the effect is there. So it's a very powerful book, and it basically says that the minds of people, so the same way people watch adverts on TV, and you may want to go and buy a particular cereal or a particular washing powder, because they have these techniques to influence your thinking. That's why on like Facebook and Instagram, they have people called influencers. And these influencers influence people's minds, the way they think and what they do. So he's speaking about a particular system that's been put in place. And as we go through the book, you'll see it's a very powerful book. And it's probably the strongest book I've read since this show's been going for the past few months. Okay? So we're going to read The Black Matrix by Franklin Jones. And it's an excellent book. So it's, I think it's got 5 chapters in total. And this should really, for the most of December, we'll be reading this book. So it's a very powerful book, yeah? The Psychological War on Black People is the subtitle of it. So let me read the preface to you. Brainwashing an entire generation of people into thinking and behaving the way those in power want them to. Back in 1970, Yuri Alexandrovich Bezemov defected from the Soviet Union and moved to the United States. Bezemov was a former KGB agent that was educated in the elite schools inside the Soviet Union. He was trained in subversion techniques and became one of the world's experts on the subject of ideological subversion, psychological warfare. In 1985, he gave an interview with interviewer G. Edward Griffin. During this session, he explains that there are 4 basic steps to brainwashing an entire generation of people into thinking and behaving the way that those in power want them to. So let me interject here very quickly. You can find this on YouTube, by the way, yeah? Alexandrovich Bezemov. Bezemov is spelt Bezemov. So Bezemov, Bezemov. So he explains, if you listen to this YouTube thing, which I listened to quite a while ago, how it kind of works. So there are 4 areas used to brainwash people. And this is according to the Russian elite of the KGB, the former Secret Service. So as you know, the current president of Russia, Putin, he was one of the key people. He used to be the top of the KGB back in the day. So I continue. He stated that doing so required an elaborate brainwashing process, which goes very slow and is divided into 4 basic stages. He calls this slow brainwashing process ideological subversion or psychological warfare, social engineering. According to Bezemov, what it basically means is to change the perception of reality of a targeted population. I hope you're listening. To such an extent that despite the abundance of information, none of them are able to come to sensible conclusions in the interest of defending themselves. I'm going to read that again. According to Bezemov, what it basically means is to change the perception of reality of a targeted population to such an extent that despite the abundance of information, none of them are able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, or their community. What is shocking is the fact that the brainwashing process he describes is consistent with what is being done to African Americans and Africans generally. The transformation is in the exact same way and follows the exact same steps. So let me say that this is proven. And it's not like, well, that book probably doesn't know what he's talking about. He's just putting down the facts in front of your face so you can see what's happened, so you can see how it works. I'll continue. So the first stage, remember he said there's 4 stages. The first stage is demoralization. According to Yuri Bezemov, the targeted population must be heavily demoralized. And this demoralizing process starts within their schools. He states that it takes them from 15 to 20 years to fully demoralize a nation of people. So let me interject here. Why does he say 15 to 20 years? Because that's a generation. If they can brainwash, this is what he's saying here, if they can brainwash a generation, then it'll be self-perpetuating. That generation will teach the generation behind them. And another key thing which is very interesting is what he just said earlier. Once people have been demoralized, should we say, he says that even though they've got information around them which may show them something different, he says they still cannot come to a sensible conclusion in the interest of defending themselves. So even when they've got information outside of them or around them, they still are stuck with how they've been educated or brainwashed to think. So he explained that this is the minimum number of years which requires educating one generation of students in the country of the enemy, being exposed to the ideology of the enemy. So I'm going to read this paragraph again, yeah? According to Yuri Bezimov, the targeted population must be heavily demoralized, and this demoralizing process starts within their schools. He states that it takes from 15 to 20 years to fully demoralize a nation of people. He explained that this is the minimum number of years which requires educating one generation of students in the country of their enemy being exposed to the ideology of the enemy. Furthermore, the process doesn't end with the school curriculum. It is much more elaborate. He says that it also requires the involvement or evolvement of a huge amount of individuals who were instrumental in creating public opinion: publishers, editors, journalists, actors, educationalists, professors of political science, etc. It involves many individuals in key positions that control information. The media is an essential part of the demoralization process. The media is used to constantly demoralize the targeted group. The targeted group must be constantly subjected to seeing only the fraudulent worst of themselves. I repeat, the targeted group must be constantly subjected to seeing only the fraudulent worst of themselves, or put another way, must be constantly bombarded by seeing a fake view of reality about themselves. Mr. Bezimov states that once the group has been fully demoralized, they are programmed to think and react to certain stimuli in a certain pattern. They are basically stuck within their state of demoralization. You cannot change their minds even if you expose them to authentic information. Even if you prove that white is not always correct and black is not always bad, you cannot change the basic perception and illogical behavior. In other words, for these people, the process of demoralization is complete. So it says that even when you show them a counter information which shows you maybe that what you believe, your beliefs you hold are wrong, they'll still reject it, because so deeply grounded has been the demoralization process that they cannot deal with it. Exposure to true information does not matter anymore. The person who is demoralized is unable to assess this true information. The facts tell nothing to them. Even if you shower them with information, with authentic proof, with documents and with pictures, they wouldn't believe you. Even if you take them by force and show them something different than they were demoralizingly taught to believe, they will refuse to believe it. Bezimov further states that with time, most of the demoralization will be done by the demoralized group to each other. Throughout history, social engineers have refined techniques designed to control large populations. Their research led to psychological warfare, programming used to control the minds of the masses of the targeted populations. Ideological subversion, in brackets, psychological warfare. Programming is not science fiction. It is a legitimate, well-proven science. The goal of this body of work is to demonstrate with a sound and constructive manner, rather than accusatory one, that presently African Americans and subsequently black people globally are targets of the most elaborate ideological subversion, psychological warfare campaign in world history. It content that when the past blatant methods used for ensuring the continuance of white dominance had become morally and socially unacceptable, that the white controlling societal elites secretly modified their efforts of meeting this objective into a form more socially acceptable with the changing times. This racist system is unlike the blatant overt types used in the past that resulted in black people unifying themselves against it, nor is it easily recognized or comprehended by most of its black victims. Because most people have never heard of this method of asserting white racism, many will try to shocking and stunning to contemplate. It is so well disguised that although many of its black victims may instinctively feel that there is something wrong, they are, however, unable to sufficiently, they are unable to sufficiently conceptualize so that they can unify and defend themselves against it. It is so sophisticated that even the very brightest of the black victims may have little, if any, hope of extricating themselves from its detrimental effects. Because the white elite controls virtually all information that we black people receive, this allows them to also control what many black people believe. Note, although this literature commonly uses the term African Americans, much of what is discussed is applicable to African people throughout the world. It is the most detrimental racist system ever to confront black people. So that is the introduction. So you see who says that the people do not really understand what is happening, so they're not able to fight it. They've divined a system which is maybe more refined, not overt like it used to be, more covert. That we don't remember, if we went back to USA and even in the UK as well, there were black power groups that arose to fight what was obvious in front of their face. But now, because it's so covert, many of us are not even aware of it. And as you said, some people think, I know there's something wrong, but I can't quite put my finger on it. It's because it's a subversive system and it's very covert. We're not even aware of it. Obviously, some people are aware of it. People who have Afrocentric thought, African-centered thought, are aware of what's happening to them. Not all, but many of them. Because Afrocentricity gives you a system or a philosophy to use to analyze what's happening in front of you. But when you're not aware, you just assume things. So when you read a newspaper tomorrow or today, if you're not aware, you cannot analyze, you cannot read between the lines of what's being said, you'll start to believe what they are saying and take it as truth. A lot of the things what you see in your face, generally, is not really the truth. There may be a little partial piece of truth in it, but because you see that partial piece, you might think that the whole story is truth, but unfortunately, it's part of a system. And we'll see shortly where this system came from and how it started to be developed. So I've got a review of the Black Matrix. So I'm going to move on. I'll come back to that. Yeah, I'll come back to that bit there. I'm going to go and so this book explains, as you can see, that there is a system set up to control the way we think and believe. Well, so this is Brother Jegna. This is the Afrocentricity Bookman Show. We are reading The Black Matrix, and we just started today by Franklin Jones. We just read the preface, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to move on. A review of The Black Matrix. And this is by Lanyuni Moyo Chionesu, aka Dr. Eric Whitfield. Though relevant, most studies about the conditions and plights of black people seemed to be focused on relatively self-blaming domestic issues brought about by the cause and effect, as manifested through crime. These are pointed annoyances and cause real distresses to many within our communities, but they are much less significant in comparison to what is being disclosed within this literature. The Black Matrix literature is a paradigm-shifting, thought-provoking, non-fiction body of work, unlike anything most of us have ever read before. It examines the fundamental core character of the true existing relationship shared between most white-dominant societies and its coexisting black population in a different and troubling light. In doing so, it exposes the profound dimension of hidden conspirational racism that still secretly exist within most white-controlled governments. This literary work is not about peddling black victimhood, nor it is a frivolous attempt to misplace blame in order to absolve ourselves of our own responsibilities. In the Black Matrix, Franklin Jones' analysis looks at the wider, more profound issues more adversely affecting black communities. Mr. Jones states that his system is practiced by the global white elites that work on both consciousness and unconscious level to ensure the continuance of their white dominance and control. He brilliantly explains the process of the psychological warfare strategy that is now used by white societal elites for control the perceptions of its black populations. Jones contends that currently the realities among black people are not entirely of their own making, and the daily, weekly, monthly and yearly reinforcements of that reality are being carefully crafted and applied by way of deliberately designed mass media perception management program. Within the mass manipulation program, the collective perceptions of black people are being negatively shaped as a means of maintaining white dominance and control. It instills black shamefulness, self-blame, self-hatred, and creates black compliance, and in some cases preference of white domination over their lives. It also results in negativity towards black population that facilitates a consensual setting for their mistreatment. This perception management strategy is so sophisticated that it attacks black populations all the while simultaneously facilitating blind black allegiance and limiting critical evaluation of its actions. Franklin Jones believes that it is imperative that black people understand how this modern system of white supremacy works in order to dismantle it. So remember when we read not long ago Black Skin, White Masks by Frantz Fanon? He says the only way to get rid of the system is to destroy it, dismantle it. This book is an excellent introduction to the system of psychological operational warfare for blacks in contemporary America and therefore worldwide and beyond, who are unaware of its ongoing fine review, and perhaps most useful to those unfamiliar with psychological warfare, its tools and effects. Those that are perplexed by the national media's ongoing constant negative depictions of black people may find some answers to Jones' impassioned and well-constructed analysis, which is thought-provoking and suggestive in terms of solutions. The portrayal of black people in the media has been analysed by many scholars. However, while these literatures have addressed the content of these media depictions and speculated on their impact, few protocols have been suggested for assessing their effects on the black viewers or upon others in the television audience. Here, Franklin Jones is a whistleblower. He has worked in the system and is aware of the machinations. He is a bell ringer backed up by theoretical and empirical evidence, to which Jones referred from time to time in his known and extensive works. A bell ringer who tells us that the Trojan horse is a gift of destruction and not one of reconciliation, love and desire for justice and peace and harmony. Franklin Jones is providing us with an immense service. He is building an awareness among black people to the point where we recognise that doing nothing is not a constructive option. The Black Matrix is a thought-provoking body of work. Unlike anything most of us have ever read before, it is a truly paradigm shifter. Read it and be prepared to break free from the Black Matrix. And that's obviously by Lanyoni Moyo Chionesu, aka Dr. Eric Whitfield. Master of Science of Educational Psychology. He is a writer, lecturer, critical thinker and musician with an emphasis on the importance of reading, critical thinking, identity issues, conceptual and abstract thinking, in addition to health, as they pertain to improving the quality of life for African Americans. And he lives and teaches in Orlando, Florida. So, Chapter 1. Chapter 1 is called The Black Matrix, because I'm sure you're all familiar with the film The Matrix. And what is the kind of the understanding of The Matrix? The Matrix really made that movie, if we all remember. It's saying to you that the world that you believe is true is not actually a true world. There is another reality out there which you're unaware of. And this is what this really book is about. It's really to break down the reality we are given, which is a fake one, to understand how our minds are manipulated and controlled. And don't forget what we read in the introduction, what Yuri Bezmenov said, is that there is a system of subversion. And generally it takes a generation to demoralize people, and then what they do will be self-perpetuating. Chapter 1, The Black Matrix. Although today most black people do not experience white racism the way their parents experienced it, they do, however, still experience it. The white elite practices of implementing systems to protect their white dominance against black populations were never truly abandoned. When the past blatant methods used for meeting these racist objectives had become morally and socially unacceptable, these practices were instead sophisticatedly reincarnated. Such practices were modified into a stealthier and more sophisticated design method that provides a more socially acceptable method for maintaining white dominance. The contemporary system that is practiced by the global white elites that works on both consciousness and unconscious levels. Throughout Western history, empires that maintain power have done so by manipulating the people that they are trying to conquer. They go out of their way to make sure that the people that they are attempting to conquer are perpetually misled and manipulated. Therefore, the conquered group's perception of reality is not their own. It is shrewdly imposed upon them without them ever even knowing it. Currently, this heinous tradition still continues in regards to many black populations. The US media's constant racially devaluated depictions of distorted portrayal of black population that amplifies the negative to the point that it distorts reality is actually a carefully crafted media-driven ideological subversion, in brackets psychological welfare, program. Within this media-driven program, African Americans, or black people generally, are being made to see themselves through mortifyingly lens secretly assigned to them by white mass manipulation experts. This contemporary racist system uses the national media proven mass manipulating capabilities to adversely shape the collective perceptions of its black populations as a means of maintaining white dominance and control. When comparing this modern racist system to those blatant types used in the past for preventing white dominance, one could make the comparison that the previous methods had a GED, which is a general educational development, while the modern system has a PhD, Doctor of Philosophy. Today's system is far more sophisticated than any racist system previously faced by Africans. It is unlike the past blatant overt types that resulted in black people unifying themselves against it. So if I stop there, I mean, if we went back, remember, as I just said earlier, there's movements came up, Black Panthers, the Nation of Islam. We had SNCC, we had many different, if you just think of in the USA, because this is their ground they're talking about, obviously we had Malcolm X, which came out of the Nation of Islam, Honorable Elijah Muhammad. We had the Black Panthers, which maybe was offshoot from Malcolm X, Nation of Islam. We had the Black Panther as well. They could see what's happening because it was so blatant. They would come to the community, just kill you, Yeah, people unify against it and fight against it. Martin Luther King will get people coming out of the churches who had never been to protest previously, who will come out of the churches and march and march and march and fight against these things. If you think about the bus boycott as well, people never normally do this thing, a protest. They decided to walk for a year. And that unity brought power. However, it was so overt what was happening, they would struggle against it. However, they said, and these are the power elites, have said, if we do something more subtle, more covert, these people won't even realise that we are still manipulating them to control them. And this is what this really is about. So how many organisations do you see now standing up and fighting? Of course, there are quite a few who fight for a cultural, social, economic, psychological freedom, but they are not on the mainstream. The mainstream amount of people, they're quite happy to, when see it happens, something happens. Like something happened at football matches yesterday in this country. Players been happening all season really strongly. Black people getting abused, yeah, and there'll be an outcry, and then they'll go back to their normal lives again. Not realising that system is 24/7, 365. It's a continual system. But we'll say, oh, there's a few bad people out there, but don't realise that it's about, I said last week, we have to understand and analyse systems. Systems are put in place. Don't think about some guy standing on the street corner shouting abuse at you, or somebody at a workplace not giving you a job or treating you unfairly. In our schools, our children are going through some serious problems. Teachers are lying on them. Teachers excluding them when they wouldn't do it the same thing to other people. But it's a system. It's not just individual having school. Obviously, what impacts us is individuals. But we must think about systems put in place. And this is what this book is really going to tell us about, yeah? The brilliance of this modern racist system is that it is no longer easily recognised or comprehended by most of black victims. It occurs in the space between obvious racism and non-racism. Its features include the ability to both engender self-hating feelings among its black victims and create negative perceptions about them. That fosters a national climate that is insensitive to their plight, both of which serves the objective of maintaining white dominance. So let me say here quickly, because when they're put on the newspapers, TV, press, crime, black people, crime, what does it do to black people? And on the other hand, what does it do to other people, non-black people watching it? Non-black people think, boy, these people are just criminals. So no matter what the police, what the politicians say, they'll agree to it. Yeah, these people are criminals. We see it every day. Because that's all they hear about us. But when we don't understand what's happening, we start to understand this, we start to believe it. And maybe we might think, yes, maybe they should bring more police on the street to brutalise our young people. Because there's so much crime. Because our minds are bombarded with crime. They said, oh, it's knife crime. But when they did a national statistics of crime in this country, most of the crimes committed by knife were not black people. A lot of the crimes against women, by the way. But Europeans, Asians, you name it, everybody's committing this crime. Clearly, there is an issue in our community, we know that. So it's not to turn our eye away from it. Clearly, there's the issue, and there's many other reasons. But part of the reason is what we're going to read in this book as well. So their minds, remember from young, from school, remember what Yuri Bezmenov says, from schools, their minds start to be manipulated. But it's a twofold thing. On one level, it's to demoralise the group itself. But the other level is to make people outside the group think, yes, it's true. These people need to be controlled. We need to lock them up. So it's a two kind of, yeah. And also they have the feeling of superiority. Oh, these people that don't act like us, look how they are, look what they do, they're terrible. So let me come back again. Most of the black victims have never heard of this method of inserting white racism. Therefore, they find it too difficult to envision. It is so well disguised that although many of the black victims may instinctively feel that there is something wrong, they are, however, unable to sufficiently conceptualize it, so they can unify and defend themselves against it. It is so sophisticated that even the very brightest of the black victims may have little or, if any, hope of extricating themselves from the detrimental effects. The psychological warfare program is deployed like a massive domestic media marketing campaign that disseminates from a trusted media sources. False black racially devaluating propaganda that marginalizes the black brand while exemplifying the white brand. It circulates black demeaning propagandizing TV, documentaries and fake news reports that are designed to frame the myth of whites' racial, moral and intellectual superiority over its black populations. It also depicts the endemic problems of black America as rooted primarily in the blacks themselves, instead of the emanating from white preferential and social inequalities. The daily assault of this black debasing perception management program upon the black psyche is purposefully designed to inadvertently manipulate and shape the minds and collective consciousness of the targeted black population. And that's a very good point there. It shapes the minds and collective consciousness. So black people as a whole will start to believe this doctrination. It may be in this book. Imagine you've got two ships. And one ship sailing along, and there's another ship sailing behind it. And say this journey goes on for like many months. And the ship behind keeps through loudspeakers, keeps saying that, oh, your ship's going to sink. Your captain's no good. He doesn't know what he's doing. After a while, if you keep hearing this month after month after month, look out, you're probably going to sink. You're all going to die. The captain is terrible. He's a criminal. He's this and that. Your people in the first ship are going to be demoralized. Think, wow, I think we're really going to sink. Because all they're getting broadcast to them day after day after day is negativity about their ship that they're in. And that the people in the ship are no good, the pilot's no good, the captain's no good, and the ship is not seaworthy. Imagine seeing this relentlessly, week after week, month, yearly, yeah? You'll start to believe it. And that's what he's really saying. When you don't have alternative information to correct the falsehoods, you start to believe the falsehoods. Start to believe that the falsehood is actually reality. The mass manipulating system produces internalized feelings of self-contemptuous responses within the targeted black population that hinders their black unity, upward mobility, and manipulates them to accept white dominance over their lives. It also reinforces seemingly preconditioned responses of resentment and prejudicial images of black people in the majority population, thereby creating a false impression of wanton black criminality and violence. And just think about the world we live in. And it'll make more sense when we read this book. This creates conditioned responses to the population, to its population. For it eventualizes to unfold against its targeted black populace without opposition or resentment. The perceptions of African Americans have always been closely tied to the social strata in the United States. This social engineering scheme is deemed a necessity by American ruling white elites because although they professes upon the surface equality for all of their citizens, they are in fact unrelentingly committed towards the perception of white dominance over its minority population. Throughout America's history, the white elites have used very conceivable means to defend and maintain their population, the group furthest away from their racial type. When the past blatant methods used for maintaining white dominance become morally and socially unacceptable, it was the logical progression and choice to use perception management programs. Certainly, this enormous disclosure may be very difficult for many to accept, since it directly contradicts many of our established beliefs. In order to recognize and accept this revelation, black people must re-examine some of the most basic beliefs and prior assumptions. More importantly, they must overcome a psychologically ingrained white is right preferentiality that has been thoroughly indoctrinated upon the collective black psyche by way of the very same perception management system. Many may even perceive this disclosure as being incredibly ridiculous. However, the term perception management is not new to the glossary of government language. It is a real and true proven system that uses the national media's proven mass manipulating capabilities to provoke targeted populations to engage in the behaviour of government the government wants. So an example of this would be, I hope you're following this okay. And this is the Afrocentricity Bookman Show. This is Brother Jegna. We are reading Black Matrix by Franklin Jones. Just think when a nation's going to go to the war. Remember they bombed Libya, destroyed the whole country, a nation destroyed now. People are just walking the street with machine guns. There's no airport, there's no this, there's no that. They've destroyed the nation. That was David Cameron and the French and the US destroyed the nation because they didn't like Gaddafi. Gaddafi didn't want to join their banking system. Gaddafi had gold. Gaddafi wanted to also create his own currency to move away from the French, the CFA franc. But remember the press, the media every day, Gaddafi's terrible. Gaddafi's killing his own people. Gaddafi this, Gaddafi that. So by the end of it, when they start dropping bombs in it, the people have been manipulated to think, yeah, we need to destroy this guy. Look how terrible he is. Look what he does. So the media are used by basically the same mass manipulating program we've spoken about. So your minds are made up for you. So when they start to deal with Gaddafi now, everybody said, yeah, what else could we do? This guy's so terrible because the media shaped your minds. This is why I remember Bill Cosby wanted to buy NBC. And where's Bill Cosby now? So I continue. And also perception. What you perceive is different to what you see, by the way. So for example, you could see a priest walking down the street. And you think, oh, this priest is very nice. He's dressed up. He's got his collar on. However, say you saw the priest and you couldn't see his collar. And it's on the floor. And it looks like he might be a bit drunk on the floor. You'll think, who's that tramp? What's he doing on the floor? Same priest. So when you see symbols, it shapes your perception of things. The same priest in a collar, you think, oh, he's the greatest, nicest guy in the world. But the same priest lying on the floor, maybe look like he's been drinking, stuff like that. Or he looks a bit, looks rough, so you think he's homeless. Your feelings, your perception of who that person is will change, even though he's exactly the same person. So what we see and what we understand could be completely different two things, yeah? It is real that the true proven system that uses national media's proven mass manipulating capabilities to provoke targeted populations to engage in the behavior that the government wants. The US Department of Defense, the DoD, describes this practice of perception management as a type of psychological operation intended to provoke the behavior you want out of the given individual and targeted group collectively. It involves the providing and discarding of information to influence the emotions, motives and objectives, reasoning of a targeted group in a way that is favourable to the originators of the information. So they use this in warfare. I think in the Vietnam War, they dropped leaflets down, telling to shake the people's mind. Oh, we're going to destroy your people. You better give in now. You better submit. And if you get these leaflets over and over and over again, dropped from an aeroplane, you think, well, maybe we might want to give in because we're going to lose the war. So these things are perception manipulation. But people use it in war, in the field of war, and we are at war. We're in a war. We are the only people who think that this war or this battleground is like a playground, but we're at war. Because people decided to wage war against us. And it's not a new thing. This war's been going on for like 2,000 years. The DoD furthermore describes these programs as being deployed by the transmission of one-sided messages, which may or may not be factual, as a form of communication to deliberately and systematically shape perceptions and direct behaviour of targeted populations to achieve responses that further the desired intent of the government. Wikipedia also defines perception management, propaganda, as a form of communication that is aimed towards influencing the attitude of a community towards some cause of position by presenting one side of the argument. Propaganda is usually repeated and dispersed over a wide variety of media in order to create the chosen result in the audience attitude. And we're going to repeat that again. Wikipedia defines perception management, or defines propaganda as a form of communication that is aimed towards influencing the attitude of a community towards some cause or position by presenting only one side of an argument. Propaganda is usually repeated and dispersed over a wide variety of media in order to create the chosen result in the audience attitudes. So Marcus Garvey always says when they use propaganda, you must always answer propaganda, because if you don't answer propaganda, people maybe accept it as truth, particularly if they hear it repeatedly over and over again. So Marcus Garvey, because he was a printer by trade, so he knew the power of the word and created X amount of newspapers, the Black Man and the Negro World. He knew the power of communication and he knew the power of propaganda. And it tells you, propaganda tells one side of an argument. And if you only hear one side, you think, well, it must be true. That's all I ever hear. The implementation of perception management programs are commonly practiced by the US government. During the early 1980s, it was used as a tool to manipulate post-Vietnam War era public opinion. The Reagan administration saw the Vietnam syndrome, a reluctance to commit military forces abroad, as a strategic threat to its Cold War policies. This caused the administration to launch a perception management program to change the American public perception of foreign events, essentially by exaggerating foreign threats and by demonizing certain foreign leaders. This strategy has proven to be very successful. It is used against any foreign nation or foreign leader that is considered an adversary of the US government. It was used during the 1980s to stoke the fear of communism. It was used even more recent years against the former Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein and Libyan leaders Muammar Gaddafi. These foreign leaders were demonized through the perception management program that depicted them as being evil dictators in order to create the conditions for their removal from power and annihilation. And when we think about it, we all understand that. We've all seen these processes. Yeah? The perception management programs are often used by US government to influence perception and climate of the nations towards the attainment of governmental objectives. Although the US Department of Defense, DoD, specifically defines perception management programs as being originally perfected by military usage, directed against foreign enemies and audiences. However, critics of the DoD charge that these manipulated conditioning programs eventually made its way into the domestic US politics as a tool to manipulate public opinion, and then evolved to the domestic control of society as a whole. Because if you went back, remember George Bush. This is Father George Bush. When people they get people like a target group into a room, and they measure their responses to certain things what are said. And when certain phrases, certain things what are said have a particular effect on them, they say, oh, that's good, that's the effect. And then when they write their speeches in the future, they'll keep on using the same terms. So they know that those terms or the phrases or sayings has a particular effect on people's minds. It's very scientifically done. Remember George Bush said, no more taxes. No more taxes. And when they did that to a target group, they said that they reacted and started pressing the keypad in their hand. So when he made his further speeches, no more taxes. He was always complete lies, because as soon as he got in again, he raised the taxes again. So he's a lie. But they use these things scientifically to make people to get votes. Yeah. According to the 1977 New York Times article written by Carl Bernstein from the beginning of the 1950s, and throughout the 1970s, the CIA had concentrated the relationships with journalists in the most prominent sectors of the American press corps. More than 800 news and public information organizations and individuals carried out assignments to manage the public's perception of the CIA. This list included 5 of the largest newspapers in the country and broadcasting networks. By the mid-1980s, CIA Director William Casey had turned the practice into a covert public diplomacy apparatus designed to self-government designed to sell governmental objectives. It often involved so-called white propaganda stories secretly financed by the government. They also went black, pushing false stories lines. The US government, like many other Western governments, so UK, as we see as we go through, the organisation who masters this stuff was created in Britain. So I think we'll hit that as we go through the book. The US government, like many other Western governments, has acquired an extensive history of using perception management programs to manipulate public opinion and to influence the perceptions of targeted groups. This statement is further endorsed by a more recently published article within the edition of Rolling Stone magazine entitled "The Man Who Sold the War" by James Bamford. The article stated that John Ryden and his Rendon Group, the leaders of a strategic field of perception management, was awarded a $16 million contract from the Pentagon to target Iraq and other adversaries with propaganda. The Rendon firm has close ties with the US government ever since 1991, when the CIA hired them to help create the conditions for the removal of Saddam Hussein from power. Perception management programs are important tools in gaining public support for a military operation against the enemy. The Rendon firm was very influential in creating conditions necessary to justify the war in Iraq. The firm created a massive perception management program that promoted the belief that Saddam Hussein was responsible for the Twin Tower terrorist attacks, despite all the evidence to the contrary, suggesting that no link existed. It also created the misperception that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction in order to greater justify the US invasion of Iraq. The US government actively used perception management programs throughout the Iraqi war. It was used throughout the entire operation in Iraq, from the initial battle through to the so-called rebuilding of Iraq. During that war, the US military dropped propaganda leaflets on Iraq and covertly planted favourable stories about the new Iraq in the Baghdad press. They did so by paying Iraqi newspapers to print stories written by US soldiers. These stories were geared towards enhancing the appearance of the US mission in Iraq. The US military also, under the cloak of merely removing all mentions of Saddam Hussein from Iraqi school educational curricula, in fact rewrote the curriculum not only to omit Saddam Hussein, but to also depict a more favourable view of the US occupation of Iraq. I hope you heard that. After they destroyed Iraq and got rid of Saddam Hussein because he had weapons of mass destruction, and as you remember, absolutely none were found there, and they knew what weapons he had because they sold them to him. But they actually rewrote the curriculum to not only omit Saddam Hussein, but also to depict a more favourable view of the US occupation. See that? Who reads curriculum? Children. So the children will grow up, if they're not told otherwise, thinking, oh, Saddam Hussein needed to go. And these US people, they're really good people. They came in to do the right thing. To see how propaganda is used. This is all part of this mass manipulation. As you know at the moment, guys, what's happening in the UK? Election time. And probably 80% of the press demonise Corbyn. Is to ensure that Boris Johnson gets elected. He said this, he likes terrorists, he likes IRA, he likes Palestinian terrorists. Over and over again. He's a threat to the country. And Boris is no problem, he's a good guy. So they use his manipulation over and over again. It happens every day in the press. Much of these same tactics were used by the social science scientists of the Tavistock Institute. Tavistock Institute, UK Institute. To get the United States into World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Serbia, and both wars against Iraq. The Tavistock Institute began as a propaganda creating and disseminating organisation at the Wellington House in London in the run-up to World War I. It has been referred to as the black hole of disinformation, a lie factory. The relevance of the Tavistock Institute will be discussed in greater details later in this chapter. So you all need to do some research, people, on the Tavistock Institute, which was organisation which began in London, in Wellington House. And it began in run-up to World War One. So this was to get the Americans into the war initially. But now these people are the world leaders of disseminating falsehoods and manipulating people's minds. The Tavistock Institute in the UK, yeah, number one. So that's for you to do a bit of research. The US government's practices of producing false news reports to influence the perception and the climate of their nation towards the obtainment of its objectives is a very common practice. This practice of psychological warfare has been used for several decades. There are countless numbers of governmentally deployed perception management projects that are currently in operation. Today, what are often deemed as being credible news stories are often totally made up perception management narratives made to form public opinions, control how people view political events, and to push governmental agendas. Moreover, there are countless numbers of subjects and groups being targeted by these governmental practices or programs. Given this fact, only the very uninformed or the very naive would believe that the US government would not use these same proven programs to meet its unrelenting objectives of preserving its white dominance. The US government's commitment towards the preservation of white dominance and control should never be underestimated and can never be overstated. So what we're going to do, guys, we're going to have a short break. This is Brother Jegna. This is the Afrocentric Bookman Show, Bless Radio, every Sunday between 4 and 6 p.m. So we're going to take a short musical break, and we'll be back on the other side.
Sponsored by Glass R Us, 730 Seven Sisters Road, London, N15 5NH. Call Glass R Us for all your glazing needs on 0208 800 6663. For your glass and double glazing repairs, shelving, tabletops, splashbacks, mirrors, shower cubicles, balustrades and balconies.
You can trust Glass R Us because they are completely transparent.
And cause much pain. But now is the time for Jah to reign. Yeah, yeah, yeah. His Majesty is coming now. His Majesty is coming now. Rejoice, rejoice. Majesty is winning now. His Majesty is winning now. Rejoice, rejoice. The wicked men them running now. The wicked men them running now. Rejoice, rejoice. Man make war and cause much pain. But now is the reign. Yeah, yeah. His Majesty is coming now. His Majesty is coming now. Rejoice, rejoice. Coming He's coming. You better rejoice. Coming yeah, yeah. He's coming. You better rejoice. Yeah, 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 yeah. Rejoice. He's coming now. He's coming now. You better coming now. He's coming.
Them can't take my soul, you know.
So you beat them, so you mistreat them, so you lock them down, and you think that you've won, but them a whole a meditation out in a iration. Them a follow Rastafari, and I live upright. So tell me where you are gonna do now. Tell me what you gonna do now. Tell me what you gonna do now that the youth are truth from the youth. You can steal the fruit, not the roots. Cause the youth are all them roots. What I don't steal the fruit and the roots. Cause the youth are all them roots. What I don't and I lose. Hold on to your roots. Them all them roots.
Now 3 in 1 and 1 in 3 is I would say. Featuring Africa, Zion and Ethiopia is I would really say. Yeah. Alphabetical order of my musical introduction, featuring Africa, Zion and Ethiopia.
Look how long they brought us down here, have us in bondage, right through these hairs, fussing and fighting.
Dealing with Africa first. A is for Africa, the land of our birth, as I would say. F is for our great forefathers who have passed away, but we always remember them. R is for the richness of the African soil, as I would say. I as far as imperial majesty, the rules are supreme over all human beings. These are the beautiful colors of the Empire Throne, you know. A's father, since they are leaders of Africa, who lay the foundation, as I would say. Yeah. Moving to Zion, you know. The holy mountain that is so high. I for the international peace with the fathers that ordain it on earth, as I would say. Oh, so that we are all one people on the face of the earth. With the same value worth, whether we are wearing pants or skirts, as I would say. Yeah. And his father numerous enemies that try to overcome the kings of kings, lords of lords. But conquer one lion and my tribe of Judah, the elector of God, as I would say. And now I'm dealing with Ethiopia, where we find E stands for the everlasting powers. T stands for time, because time is the complete master. And no one knows if it will be peace or disaster. Yeah. H is for home, and no more will we roam, or live in Rome. Yeah. I saw the everlasting inspiration he gave unto I and I. Oh, so that the Almighty is no ordinary one in this land. So please know where you stand, y'all. D stands for his hour, which covers the whole world day and night. And I saw the little infant which he suffered to come unto him. He saw the ancestors.
What, the Black Nation? I love it. From the day my born, when it done, no sir, my color the first. I ain't no last. So you expect I to search. What's the for the youth? Look, woman and child, you, yeah. For you, I really have so much love. Dollar bills and coins will fade away. Could never make I so proud. Oh, yeah. and child. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. For you I got so much love. Oh, oh. All the bills and coins will fade away. They could never make I proud. Allowed motherland Africa still remains so fine. Empresses and emperors living from in those times. I know you're the first to give birth unto mankind. Now let me say you're the earth, being Omega's divine. Yeah, take her to die and I give thy praise. That's where my covenant will be always. How have you been going through those stages? I've been away for many days. Love, woman and child. Yeah, yeah, yeah. For you I really have so much love. All the bills and kinds will fade away. Only you could make I proud. Yeah. Black woman and child. You, yeah, yeah, yeah. For you I really have so much love. All the bills and kinds will fade away. They never yet make I proud. Who knows who will tread upon your road just to make things great? Oh yeah, you and the children, I see them in front of your face. I say, see them close as you live, increase their faith. Marcus Garvey don't save him, save the future from us. Oh, 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 naturally nature is the way to your needs. You were born as the one to conceive, now let my joy put away your grief. You and the child as smooth as the breeze. Woman and child, you, yeah, yeah, yeah. For you I'm having so much fun, yeah. All the bills and kinds will fade away. They could never put I down. Hey, 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 black woman and child. You, yeah, yeah, yeah. For you I have so much love. All the bills and kinds will fade away. They would never make I proud. Alone, one those standing at your door, dressed in Ethiopian clothes, coming more and more. Oh, what a lovely day! The blessing is so pure. Someone conceived today of this, I am sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Black woman and child, you, yeah, yeah, yeah. For you have got so much love. Dollar bills and coins will fade away. They never yet make I proud. Oh, oh, oh. Oh, black woman and child, you, yeah, yeah, yeah. For you I have so much love. Dollar bills and coins will fade away. They never yet make I proud. Say it aloud. Mamaland Africa still remains so fine. Empresses and emperors living from in those times. I know you're the first to give birth unto mankind. Now let me say you're the earth, being Omega's divine. Oh, oh, oh. Take I to Zion, I give I praise. That's where my covenant will be always. How have you been going through those days? Dumping away for many years, yeah.
This show is sponsored by Glass R Us, 730 Seven Sisters Road, London, N15 5NH. Call Glass R Us for all your glazing needs on 0208 800 6663. For your glass and double glazing repairs, shelving, tabletops, splashbacks, mirrors, shower cubicles, balustrades and balconies.
You can trust Glass R Us because they are completely transparent.
Yes, we're back on the other side of a short musical break. Hope you guys enjoyed them nice tunes. I had a message from somebody told me those tunes are very uplifting and yeah, nice vibration. Please remember that the studio number is 07944 431 366. So if you have any comments on what I'm reading, please 07944 431 366. Please text in or WhatsApp in your message, yeah? So this is the Brother Jegna. This is the Afrocentricity Bookman show. We just started today, we are reading The Black Matrix by Franklin Jones. This is one of the most powerful books you'll ever read or even hear about. It tells you what's happening here. Because remember what I say to you every week? What we do for ourselves depends on what we think of ourselves. And what we think of ourselves depends on what we know about ourselves. And what we know about ourselves depends on what we were taught. So if you think about the manipulation of mass media, what do we think about ourselves? Remember, that shapes what we do for ourselves and how we act to each other. And this is the power of the mass manipulation of people's minds. It kind of shapes the way they think. Sometimes they think you're thinking something because it's your thought, but sometimes that thought's been put into the back of your mind unconsciously, and you'll not even realize that it was put there. So anyway, we're going to continue reading The Black Matrix by Franklin Jones. Please remember the studio number 07944 431 366. Any of your comments, please just text them in, please WhatsApp them in. Presently, America's black populations are now the unknown victims of the most ostentatious perception management program in history. It is vital that we recognize that this disclosure is much more than a screwball conspiracy theory. The US government has a long history of using perception management programs to influence targeted groups. The methods used within these programs are remarkably consistent with the psychosocial treatment endured by America's black population. America's black population, in fact, endures the exact same media treatments of those groups being targeted by the US government's perception management programs, wherein they constantly, mortifyingly villainize, demoralize, and by the US media. America's white elite's unrelenting commitment towards the preservation of their white dominance and control necessitated that such a program be implemented against the black population. While many blacks do realize that they are being inaccurately, negatively portrayed by the white control media outlets, most, however, do not recognize the intentional significance of these depictions. This mass manipulation system works upon the concept that the mind's perceptions can be altered by controlling the information given to it. The white media's constant negative depictions of black populations are part of a massive perception management program, of which racist white ideology devaluating blackness is being pumped into collective minds of black people without being challenged or counterbalanced by black self-loving images. And that is a key to it. If you always get images, terrible, 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 but there's no black love type images, what do our children think? What do our children do? You see some of the violence on the street, you can see where some of it comes from. Since information directly influences our thoughts, and then this process allows the controller of information to control our thoughts, it's constant deplorable depictions of black people that subjects them to seeing only the fraudulent worst of themselves. It's deliberately designed to corrupt their senses of racial black unity and cohesion, mold the character of self-hatred, engender self-doubt, self-loathing, distrust among their group, and insinuates that blacks admire, respect and trust only whites. So if I read this again, what you do for yourself depends on what you think of yourself, and then think about how they mold the character of self-hatred, engender self-doubt, self-loathing and destruction amongst groups, and insinuate the black admire, respect and only trust whites. Women said, oh, why don't black people come together? I think you can see what's happening there. And remember, you've had this system from school, you just didn't realize it. From you folks who went to school. And as you see later in the book, when we first went to church, these systems will be put in place. These types of mass manipulation programs are very effective because irrespective of how smart a person may be, any group having the same ideas bombarded into their head by sources they trust will come to accept these ideas. It is rather easy to control what people think by controlling the information given to them. This system is designed to adversely shape and distort the collective perceptions and consciousness of black populations. As a means of maintaining white dominance, its unrelenting daily assault of this perception management program upon the black psyche also drills the message that blacks are powerless, of less moral and intelligence, and that they need whites to govern over their lives. Some of the black victims of the perception management program are so convinced of these negative depictions of themselves that they cannot change their minds, even if you expose them to information to the contrary. This program totally detaches African Americans from their sense of power and reality. And if I rephrase that, this program totally detaches black people from their sense of power and reality. And if I put it another way, this program totally detaches Africans on the continent from their sense of power and reality. Any group having the same ideas bombarded into their heads by sources they trust will come to accept these ideas. This program utilizes the directive of divide and conquer, and it only manipulates black people to accept white dominance over their lives. It conditions them to prefer it. I hope you hear that part there. And it not only manipulates black people to accept white dominance over their lives, it conditions them to prefer it. For most African Americans, it's if presented with the question of, are you brainwashed? Most will respond with the categorical answer to absolutely no. This is because when most people hear the term of brainwashing, they usually think of terms of classic conspiracy theories that refers to a overt mind control programming. However, the practice of perception management programming is neither science fiction nor is it supernatural. Perception management psychological warfare programs are thoroughly well proven that use propaganda to adversely affect the collective perceptions of the targeted populations. Moreover, more governments have been using these programs for decades. Perception management programs are commonly used methods of warfare that exceeds the traditional limits of conventional warfare. Therefore, you shouldn't be so hasty in dismissing the possibility of your own brainwashing, because the controlling white elites commonly use perception management programs to manipulate public opinion. They've studied and used these programs for decades. It is a real governmental tool. So again, this is Brother Jegna. This is the Afrocentricity Bookman Show. Every Sunday, we are reading a new book, The Black Matrix, by Franklin Jones. Therefore, before dismissing the possibility of your own brainwashing, please allow me to ask you a few preliminary questions. Do you believe in the United States most violent crimes are committed by its black populations? Do you think that the largest recipient of welfare or large benefactors of affirmative action are black Americans? Do you believe that most black men prefer to marry outside of their race? Do you believe that most whites are higher on IQ tests than blacks? Do you believe that most black people do not enjoy reading? Do you believe that despite of having of unprecedented history to the contrary of collective unity, the black people now are their own worst enemies? Do you believe that Africans are incapable of properly governing themselves? Do you believe that the white race, despite having an unprecedented brutal history to the contrary, now possesses higher moral characters and are less likely to engage in criminal behaviour? Well, if you answered yes to any one of these questions, you probably are brainwashed. If you answered yes to more than one, you are certainly brainwashed. Certainly you will reply, isn't that what most people think? Well, the answer to that is yes. But just because most people believe it is true, doesn't make it true. All it means is that you and the majority of those people around you are receiving the same fraudulent information. Therefore are all being brainwashed. This mass brainwashing scheme is a significant factor for the deeply entrenched, inaccurate, self-hating sentiment now so commonly held by many African Americans. Self-contemptuous perceptions that is totally consistent, that is self contemptuous perceptions that are totally inconsistent with the facts. One such example of these self-contemptuous misconceptions or misperceptions among many blacks is the belief among themselves that they are collectively, as a race, do not enjoy reading. Many of us, unfortunately, share the unpleasant experience of hearing the racist derogatory saying that if you want to hide something from a black person, all you have to do is merely hide it within a book. It's incredible that such a racist, black demeaning belief could now be held by many blacks themselves. The belief that blacks are lesser inclined to read than that of whites is absolutely untrue. It is a lie contrived by the white controllers of information. In fact, black readership in the US has never been more higher than it is now. For never more than now have there existed more black-owned bookstores, black-owned publishing companies, more published black authors. Furthermore, major black-owned publishing companies, such as the Johnson Publishing Company, has continued to sustain its position in the Forbes Fortune 500 list. It has done so for decades, almost exclusively upon the backs of millions of black readers. And even now, despite being within a national recession, African American readership is so significant that two major retail bookstores, Borders and Barnes & Noble, have dedicated within their thousands of stores entire sections dedicated to black customers. Moreover, these companies both attribute a high portion of their annual earnings to the African American market. Therefore, clearly, black people do read, and often. So you can see how we are manipulated, and we continue to do this stuff ourselves. We repeat this stuff. Who created that term, or the phrase, or the belief that black people don't read? Who created it? Because we will parrot it, but who created it? There's another line here I said here earlier. Do you think that the largest recipient of welfare or large beneficiaries of affirmative action are black Americans? Did you know in the USA there are more white people on welfare than black people? And also, I was just watching something the other day that Trump giving billions to white farmers because he's saying that they might be badly affected by China. But these are millionaire farms they're giving billions to. However, I read that they're cutting food stamps to the poorest people of the nation. This is Trump. So if they're giving multi-billions to millionaire farmers in the first place in the South, but they're cutting the poorest people getting the food stamps, what is the reality of America? Who's getting more recipient of welfare? So it just shows you our minds are manipulated to things that, and what does Steve Wonder says? When you believe in things you don't understand, you suffer. Okay, so it shows you that, yeah. So the question then becomes, how did so many blacks come to develop such a deeply entrenched negative misconception of their own race? How did so many get this way? How is it possible? How is it possibly coincidental that millions of black people are collectively sharing the same inaccurate, degrading misperceptions of themselves, while at the same time favourably perceiving whites? The entrenched collective negative misperceptions, commonly held by so many African Americans, are not the result of some strange, enormous coincidence. They are, in fact, deliberately designed outcomes. These negative perceptions of themselves have been shrewdly indoctrinated into the collective mind without them even knowing it, by way of ideological subversion, black debasing perception management programs. So you can see how it works. The immense sophistication of the psychological warfare programs requires a more simplified explanation of just how it is being used against African Americans. Therefore, let us do so by providing such an example. Imagine that a crew of people. So this is what I read to you earlier. I knew I read it somewhere. Remember I spoke to you earlier about the ships? So let the author say it. Imagine that a crew of people were upon their own massive ship, and that this ship was being followed by another neighbouring ship. Not just any other neighbouring ship, but one that was constantly broadcasting derogatory messages about the first group, such as messages as that your ship was lesser smaller, not seaworthy, perhaps slower, slowly sinking, or that the crew were incompetent. With time, the group receiving these derogatory negative messages of themselves, being unable to refute or confirm these deficiencies, will grow weary and paranoid of each other. The taunted group will eventually even come to accept those negative assessments of themselves. The perception created by the taunting eventually unconsciously influences how the taunted group perceives themselves, subsequently causing them to become distrustful of themselves, doubting themselves, hating themselves, and eventually fighting amongst themselves. Shall I repeat that bit? The perception created by the taunting eventually unconsciously influences how the taunted group perceives themselves, subsequently causing them to become distrustful of themselves, doubting themselves, hating themselves, and eventually fighting amongst themselves. The taunted group may even become so besieged by deep feelings of inadequacy that they may even jump into the sea and attempt to swim towards the taunting ship, now believing it to be superior than the own ship, if the own ship was in fact better. This manipulation process utilizes the psychological directive that perception becomes reality to adversely affect the recipient's group in terms of their behavior. No matter how capable the mind may be, its reliability is only as great as the information being fed into it. In this way, human beings are much more like computers. All you have to do is repeatedly give them a particular information, and you can persuade an entire population towards an implied objective. And what is that objective? You need to look at the word menticide. It doesn't matter if the information is true or not. Most will agree because they have been given the same information. It is totally achievable to control what groups think by controlling the information given to them. And we need to teach our children psychology. What I'm teaching you now is psychology, yeah? And they think, psychology, people need to go to university. Can you not understand what I'm saying to you? We can break it down and teach our children so our children understand. This will help some of the behaviours I see our youngsters doing. And sometimes when you ask them, they don't even know why they do it. They give excuses or give examples, but which could be totally incorrect. But we need to teach our children what is happening to them. And this is why I'm teaching you. I read this book to you. I'm teaching myself as well, by the way. So you can teach others. It's very important. We don't sit down on this information. This information is only good if you use it. The taunted group may become so besieged by deep feelings of inadequacy that they may even jump into the sea and attempt to swim towards the taunting ship, now believing it's superior. So this is how white supremacy works. We start to believe that maybe these people taunting us are superior than us. It doesn't matter if the information is true or not. Most will agree because they too have been given the same information. It is totally achievable to control what groups think by controlling the information given to them. Within a real-time setting, this mortifying psychosocial treatment is precisely what is being deliberately done to African Americans or black people generally, of which they are being constantly bombarded and inundated by governmentally deployed false negative images of themselves, spread through totally white-controlled media sources that intentionally subjected them to seeing the fraudulently worst of themselves. Basically, a fake reality. We begin to take fantasies and falsehoods as reality. This is what happens. Basically, because I've read a few of these psychology books by black psychologists, and what it is, it's about definitions. The key to it is definitions. They define the world. And if we buy into that definition, the definition we take the definitions of people who hate us. Imagine walking down the road believing the thoughts of somebody who hates you. That's how self-hatred gets into us. So definitions, when we accept the definitions of others, then we walked down the road not in a good place. Our self-concept becomes negative. You start to do behaviors which takes away that pain. Because if your self-concept is negative, it's painful to you. And if your self-concept is painful, you would start to engage in behavior which takes that pain away. So what things can we do to take that pain away? Well, maybe you can kill somebody who looks like you, because maybe get rid of somebody who looks like you, maybe take away the pain. You may start taking some drugs, alcohol, gambling. You do anything which takes your mind away from that pain. And this is how it works. These debasing depictions of blacks are deliberately designed to break down the black population's sense of racial unity and allegiance, mold the character of self-hatred, and engenders self-hate or self-doubt, self-loathing, division among the group, hence weakening their ranks. It also frames the myths of whites' racial, moral, and ethical superiority over black populations. This applied negative depiction of black population is also being done to make their group look like they are part of a dangerous, mediocre, and scary fringe. This process is known as group character assassination. It fosters a conceptual setting that facilitates black mistreatment. This is Brother Jegler. This is the Afrocentricity Bookman Show. We are reading The Black Matrix by Franklin D. Jones. Just go to theblackmatrix.com or theblackpeoplesmatrix.com and you get a lot of information there, and you can buy the book. This book can only be bought online, by the way, yeah? You will not find this book, The Black Matrix by Franklin Jones, in Amazon and places like that, or even the local bookshops. Theblackmatrix.com or theblackpeoplesmatrix.com, you'll be able to buy the book online. This is a powerful book. I just started, and so much information it's given us. The brother has got a military background, Dr. Franklin Jones, so he's aware. Some of the stuff he's saying, he was trained it within the system, so he knows what he's talking about. The disclosure that the US government produces false news reports to influence the perception of the targeted populations to meet its governmental objectives is entirely true. The way in which the program works in regards to targeting black people is that government agents that specialize in psychiatry, propaganda, and social engineering analyzes and studies everything about the targeted population. Their beliefs, their likes, dislikes, strengths, and vulnerabilities. Once you know these things and what motivates your target population, you then are ready to begin psychological operations against them. This surveillance information about his black population is gathered. Decisions are then made on which fraudulent stories to produce, to best negatively define and engender certain psychological feelings among and about his black population that assists in maintaining white dominance. Have you seen some US TV? How do they depict black people? You cannot you cannot start to watch these programs without being homosexual men, homosexual women, criminality. They start playing the back rap music. And as soon as you start to hear the back rap music come, you know they're going to link some sort of black criminality. So rap music is criminal. So these things shapes our mind. So when you hear rap now, you could be walking down the street and you hear rap, you're kind of conditioned to think, oh, maybe something criminal's going on. So if I'm driving down the street, playing some rap music, and you hit my windows down, you might think I've got some sort of criminality going on in the car. So these things condition our minds, position our perceptions of things. We need to understand. But if they keep us showing, so imagine a little African American boy or girl growing up watching these TV programs, and they start to see homosexuality. They'll think that it's the norm. Maybe we should all become homosexual because the American system does not fear homosexuals. But it's not part of our culture. Homosexuality is not part of black culture. Of course they're black homosexuals, because when in Rome, people do what Rome are doing. But when we go back to our own culture, our ancestors wrote about not doing these sort of practices. I was watching, one thing I love about the African church in America, in the African continent, because I know the church is there to condition the mind, and we'll see as we go through this book. But one thing, they are sticking to their guns with the homosexuality. They're saying we do not do such practices. They attack African leaders for not wanting everybody to be homosexual. They say that's not us, it's not our sexuality. He says, do you see it in nature? Do you see two female lions? Two male lions going together? You'll not see it in nature. And they may pick up the only one out of a billion living kind of animals or insects or anything like that. Say, look, we see it there, but what's one in a billion? They try to make it the norm. Homosexuality is not part of our culture. Am I saying attack homosexual? No, you don't do anything like that. If they're homosexual, they're homosexual. But it's not African culture. It's European culture. If you went back to, what's the first Greek civilization we're familiar with? The Greeks. And if you see some of the stuff that they used to do, all the Greek philosophers, virtually every single one of them, were homosexual. So it's natural for their culture. But that's European culture. We're African people. Our ancestors wrote about, we don't do that stuff. We don't have that illicit sex. But they try to make it norm, try to influence you. Like their culture, I just said, remember when we saw the book? He shows you that their culture is a superior culture. Ethically and morally, it's the best one. So if you believe that, you start to carry their practices. Remember they went into Africa, they said, polygamy, you can't marry 2 or 3 people. Man, you can't marry one woman. However, they said that to be homosexual is fine though. So you can't marry another woman, a man and a woman, but you can love a man. See how they influence us? So polygamy is wrong, a man and a woman is wrong, but homosexuality is fine. Does that even make sense? Man and a woman are so powerful, they can create life. But what can a man and a man create? Or what can a woman and a woman create? I'm not talking about in the science lab, because that's unnatural. I'm talking about naturally. Man and woman are so powerful, they can create life. That's astounding. They can create life. I continue. The disclosure that the US government produces false news reports to influence the perception of the targeted populations to meet its governmental objectives is entirely true. The way that the programs work in regards to targeting black people is the government agents that specialize in psychiatry, propaganda and social engineering analyzes and studies everything about the targeted black population, their beliefs, their likes, dislikes, strengths and vulnerabilities. Once you know these things, and what motivates your target group, you are then ready to begin psychological operations against them. This surveillance information about the black population is gathered. Decisions are then made on which fraudulent stories to produce the best negatively defined and engender certain psychological feelings among and about the black populations that assist in maintaining white dominance. These fraudulent black debasing stories and news reports about black population are then leaked to its collaborators in the news media, which either knowingly or unknowingly carry the stories as their own. These derogatory black propaganda are then disseminated unrelentingly elsewhere. It is deliberately perpetuated through news releases, in magazines, articles, radio, television, press releases, documentaries and false consensus reports. I'm sure you've read them in the press. I know we've got some sort of institutes which keep an eye on the press, but if they have 10 stories in a newspaper about black people, 7 of them will be about crime. Did you hear what I said? This is an analysis. If they have 10 stories about black people in a newspaper, 7 of them will be about crime. So if you're outside and you think about every time you see crime, they're criminals. They manipulate the black people and they manipulate the non-black people. And this is the editors over and over again. However, the weapon is not how the message is carried, but instead within the message that it carries and how these messages negatively shape the collective perceptions of the black population. And this negative depiction of black people in the media creates perceptions that lead to non-deliberate decisions that are made below the level of consciousness. So it just goes into our consciousness, kind of slips in, we not even realise it's going in. And ultimately leads to unconscious similar behaviours. The motto of this black debasing perception management program is to divide and conquer. Given that the strength of African Americans has been their immense unity, then logically attacking that strength would be a significant goal in this manipulation program. Because in the USA, I don't know if you might be familiar, I know many of you are, they've got something in the USA now called ADOS, African Descendants of Slaves. So they want to have their origin as being a descendant of a slave. However, these ADOS people are saying that they are the root and these are the foundation of American society. And West Indians who came to America, they treat them like enemies. And Africans who came from the continent. So I've heard them, these ADOS people, disparaging people who come from the Caribbean, South America, and the African continent. Oh, these not real people. They hate us. They hate our culture. They hate our history. And it's all about division. Where would this ADOS come from? Think about the book I'm reading. That we must divide and conquer. And now these people are up and running. It's crazy. They're calling people coons and all kind of destructive terminologies. One said, they hate our history. They hate Martin Luther King. Why would you want to say that an African American hates Martin Luther King? How would you say, sorry, a person from the African continent or from the Caribbean hates Martin Luther King? Are you crazy? People from all over the world love Martin Luther King. Black people. But they're creating a narrative that divides us up. So they're doing the work of who? CIA, FBI, you name it. They're doing the work of these white elites. And they don't realise that they're doing it. Check out this ADOS stuff. There's some crazy behaviour going on there. And also, why do you want your root to be a slave? American descendants of slaves. ADOS. So they don't want to know about Africa. American descendants of slaves. That's who we are. That's our foundation. We're the foundation of the country. The background of it is about the reparations. They believe that get reparations. So they're saying if reparations are given in the USA, it's only these ADOS people are supposed to get these reparations. All these people came later. West Indians, South Americans, African continent, they're not supposed to get any of this money. That's kind of the background. So again, you can see they're adopting this European culture, individuality. I'll take mine, but nothing to do with you. They forget about the collective. They forget about Ubuntu. I am because you are, and because you are, I am. Collectivity. We've got strength in our union is a key to it. Strength in our unity. Pan-Africanism. We all come together. Malcolm X's mother. Farrakhan's mother. They all come from West Indies. Are you going to say these people are not part of the Stokely Carmichael? Kwame Ture. Mother come from the Caribbean. Are you going to say these people are not a part of African American history? They're crazy. Divide and conquer is what this philosophy is, and this ADOS, that's where it comes from. You can see these people are manipulating our minds, and they'll think, ADOS is just something we thought up. But you can see by the book we're reading, divide and conquer philosophies. We'll run for something, we think it came from us. Yeah, we thought it up. But they've been put in our mind for decades and decades and decades. And then we run with it thinking that we created it. But always say, who benefits? Who benefits from Africans dividing themselves and arguing amongst themselves? Tell me who benefits. Do Africans benefit? So these are the things we need to think about. These are the power of the information from these books. Sometimes you think you're doing something. You might go into a shop, for example, and then you'll pick up, I don't know, a chocolate bar, for example. And why do you pick the chocolate bar up? Chances are you may have seen it in a commercial on the TV, and you don't realise it. Like a magnet, you just go pick it up. Oh, I wonder what this tastes like. It might be good. And you think it's own fault, but in the back of your mind, the TV said, yeah, try it. So we don't understand there's a manipulation system that goes on, and we just take it as normal, but we need to think about this. Philosophy, they say one way to look at philosophy is not only that you're thinking about something, you're aware that you are thinking about something. Not just thinking about it, you're aware that you're thinking, you're carrying out an analysis of something. This is really philosophy. It's deeper thought, not just a surface thought that you just hear something, you just do it. The philosophy is about you're aware that you're carrying out a philosophical operation. You're aware that you are thinking about something. Sometimes we need to start to do some deep thought, because our people always had deep thought. Who were the first philosophers? We spoke about earlier in this book about, you want to hide something from a black person, black people don't read, put it in a book. Who created the library? Who wrote the first book? The first book, Africa. First library, Africa. The first religious writing, Africa. This is not maybe, this is fact. So we created a library. First libraries, Africa. First universities, come on. Do I need to tell you where? So we've been turned upside down and manipulated by these systems who people will create this stuff from we're at school, and we start to think the worst about ourselves. The children says, oh, he's acting white. So who's the person they'll say is acting white? The person is doing his studies. So we believe to think that intellectualism is not a black trait. We are people of a high culture. Intellectualism is what we do. That's why we created it. Who is the world's first intellect? Tell me, who is the first intellect in history? True intellect. We have to go back to Imhotep. Why? Because Imhotep was a physician, he was an architect, he was a priest, he was a prime minister, he was a poet, he was an astronomer, multi-genius. We created the concept of multi-genius. These are African people. We know he's African. We got pictures of him. They made carvings of him. There's loads of carvings of Imhotep. You can just see what he looked like. But come on, he's an African state. So come on, it's Africa. So intellectualism, or the first intellect, was Imhotep. Obviously, Hollywood. How does Hollywood project him? In one of those, I don't watch these films, but I've been told in one of these mummy films, they've got Imhotep like he's some sort of murdering demon, because they've got to destroy our image. They must always destroy our image. So when you think of Imhotep like a child who is not aware of what I just said, oh, Imhotep, he's a bad guy, but he's the first intellect in the world. The term eat, drink and be merry was kind of assigned to Imhotep. But the first stone building, first monumental stone building was Imhotep. He's maybe not the first physician, because there are some before him, at least two before him, but he's the first famous one. He was such a high level he reached that he was in Kemet, they had the temples to sort of revere him. And these temples were the first medical training schools. The temples to Imhotep were the first medical training schools. Tell me where Europeans were when we was creating this first medical training schools. They're walking around a barren wasteland. Didn't have to make clothes, didn't have a pot to pee in or a window to throw it out of, because they didn't have to build a house. But now these are the people we look to for sophistication. How did they become sophisticated? Who educated? The Greeks. Who was Europeans' first civilization? The Greeks, according to them themselves, they went to Africa to learn philosophy, mathematics, science, art, architecture. This is according to them themselves. But somehow we've been turned upside down, inside out, because of our most recent history. We actually believe that these people actually gave us something. We educated Europeans twice, by the way. Not only the Greeks, but when they had the Middle Ages after Rome fell, again, when they had their Renaissance, where did it come from? The Moors in Spain. We was there for 700 years. 774 years in Spain, in the Iberian Peninsula. So when you understand who you are, you get your intellect back, you get your culture back, you get your understanding of the world back, your worldview, and then when you have a better understanding of what your culture is. The war out there, people, is a cultural war. They'll destroy your culture, tell you your culture is inferior. But within their culture, they've got people sleeping with animals. Do you know in Germany they've got brothels with animals in there? I'm not lying, you just Google it. They've got brothels and they're kind of legal to have brothels so men can sleep with animals. Sister, I think in the USA very recently, her brother could legally marry his sister. How can we follow that culture when that culture is clearly going to lead to destruction? We need just to stay with who we are. Because our culture is our greatest culture in the world. Why? Because it's ours. Other people have their great culture, that's great, but our culture is great as well. Why? Because it comes from us, comes from our centre. We have to be who we are. The only reason why we're not sure of who we are, because of what we think of ourselves or what we do for ourselves, depends on what we think about ourselves, and what we think about ourselves depends on what we're taught. And when you can see now by this little introduction of the book, we can continue it next week. We are manipulated by sophisticated mind manipulation systems put in place to manipulate us. And these happen every day. Whether they're going to go to war, they'll do it. Well, if they want you to go into a shop to buy a particular product, they'll do it. And it's day or day. And elections, yeah, vote for this one, vote for that one. It's there. But what we're talking about the book, these manipulate our perceptions by making us think the extreme worst of ourselves. The extreme worst of ourselves. And if you believe it, then what are you going to do? You can see what some of our youths do, some of our youngsters do. If I really hate myself, the chances are I'll hate somebody who looks like me as well. And it's not going to look pretty when I sort of unleash the stuff, yeah? And also, if it brings you pain to be who you are because you told it so negative, then you'll start to engage in behavior which is going to take you away from that pain. Drugs, alcohol, criminality, who knows what you might do? Sometimes you say, what did you do? I don't know why I did it. So we need to understand psychology and we need to teach our children psychology. And this is what this book is. So I'm going to continue this book next week. The Black Matrix by Franklin Jones. This is the Afrocentricity Bookman Show. And you can see this book is powerful. And I've only really just started. We're only just really on chapter 1. So you guys have a great week. Look after your family. You need to have revolutionary thoughts every day because there's a revolution out there. There's a war going out there. And we need to have revolutionary thoughts. And it's not why it's a revolution, because all we need to do is come back to who we are. And once we come back to who we are, it's all over. All this manipulation of our minds is all over because we'll understand it. We'll understand what's being done to us. So anyway, this is Brother Jegna tuning out. You guys have a great week. And I'll catch you next week.
This show is sponsored by Glass Are Us, 730 Seven Sisters Road, London, N15 5NH. Call Glass Are Us for all your glazing needs on 0208 800 6663. For your glass and double glazing repairs, shelving, tabletops, splashbacks, mirrors, shower cubicles, balustrades and balconies.
You can trust Glass Are Us because they are completely transparent.
Dancing in heaven. You hear me? Wake up, people. Wake up. Wake up. Wake up, people. Wake up now. Wake up. Wake up, people. Wake up. Wake up. Wake up the people, Lord. Wake up. Listen. Wake up, people. Wake up. Wake up. Wake up, people. Wake up now. Wake up. Wake up, people, wake up, wake up. Wake up the people, Lord, wake up, Listen, it's all right. It's okay. Remember, the sun will shine in the morning. God bless.